How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with your boys, Alex and Ryan. Splitting the series against the Tampa Bay Rays wasn't exactly what we wanted. We wanted to win that series, get a little bit more leverage in the AL East. We are still 8 games behind, but some good news. We aren't in last place anymore because the Boston Red Sox have so kindly taken that spot from us. But right now, we're looking ahead to a 4-game series against the Toronto Blue Jays. And the issue right now is our starting pitching, right? A couple of weeks ago, our pitching, bullpen looked really solid. Things were going pretty well. We were getting some good performances, but the offense was the real unit that was struggling, and now it's kind of flipped around. The starting pitching is struggling, and the offense has picked up the slack. They've scored 22 runs in the last 3 games, but we've given up 21 runs. So right now we're going to talk about the starting rotation, the issues there, kind of some things working, reinforcements hopefully on the way. Luis Severino definitely is getting close to return. But the guys we've been relying on have struggled. Nestor Cortes has been bad recently. I think he's given up 15 runs in his last 3 games. Of course, Clark Schmidt cannot be trusted. Johnny Brito, he needs more time at the AAA level, in my opinion. And Domingo Germán's probably been our best pitcher aside from Garrett Cole. So that's not what you want to see. Is after we spent $162 million this offseason on Carlos Rodon, and we bring in Luis Severino back on the $15 million club option there. So right now, there's some issues. We want to discuss them, what the near future looks like for the Yankees in the rotation. But Ryan, before we dive into it, how you do today, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I think it's fair to say that yesterday felt like a game that was kind of left on the table. This is really the second time in the last week that the Yankees have left the game on with the Rays on the table, right? You think of that 6-0 blown lead, and then you think of yesterday's game. Those are 2 games the Yankees could have won. The Yankees could have been in a much better position than they are right now. Can you sit here and can you, can anything we say change the fact that those games were lost? No, but the starting pitching is a big reason for that, right? Obviously, Garrett Cole's been great this year. You mentioned Domingo Germán. I think his ERA is better than league average, if I'm not mistaken. So those are your 2 guys there, and everyone else has been horrible, right? I know Cortes got off to a good start, and then that Texas start really it was a nightmare, and he's been on a really bad slump lately. But the Yankees as a whole with the rotation has been below average, right? And that's not something you anticipated. Yes, you expect that they would struggle with all the injuries, but you don't expect that Cortes is going to be this bad all year. And then Schmidt and Brito, those were 2 question marks for you. You felt like if you could just get one of them to be solid, you could have a lot better results. And they've been the furthest thing from solid, right? Clark Schmidt's a reliever, right? I think that's kind of the, that's kind of the takeaway early on here. Can he make it as a reliever? I think he can, right? But is being a reliever the same thing as being a starter? And are the Yankees in a position where they can go with an opener? I'm not sure, right? Because not only is the Yankees starting pitching depth kind of in shambles, their bullpen depth. We're starting to see the ugly side of having so many injuries. Now we can debate whether Albert Abreu was even the best guy to go to, given the available guys there. But he was someone they were going to have to go to eventually. And considering the context of that game, that's not a guy you necessarily want to go to. But the rotation causes 2 issues. Number 1, they aren't pitching well, right? That's the obvious one. They give up a lot of runs. That's not good. But 2, they're not pitching deep into games. You're not getting guys who are going to get you to the 6th inning reliably. And that means your bullpen, which is already spent, has to be used a lot. Had a guy like Clark Schmidt been able to get through the 5th inning, the Yankees could have been able to hand it to their bullpen and kind of maybe not cruise to victory, but feel pretty good about their chances, right? You had Ron Marinaccio available, you had Ian Hamilton available, you had Michael King available. For 4 innings, really, you can piece it together with those 3, right? Add on maybe a Jimmy Cordero type or literally just 1 or 2 outs from Albert Abreu, and that's your baseball game. But unfortunately, you weren't able to get that from Clark Schmidt. Johnny Brito struggles to get to the 5th inning, so we're not even talking about, okay, let's look past the 5th inning. He struggles to even get there in the first place. Germán can get you past the 5th, but you don't really feel too confident letting him go 3 times through the order or even a 4th time through, just because he's such a walking home run issue. At any point in time, someone can go yard off of him, and that's something that Aaron Boone has literally expressed concern about, right? Who remember that nightmare game against Cleveland? He mentioned the home run being why he didn't want to trust Germán there, right? So it's clear that the Yankees are aware of this. Aaron Boone's aware of this, and that's a factor in his bullpen management. Garrett Cole's been excellent this year, but that's really it, right? An excellent starter, a solid starter, Germán, and then 3 really bad starters. The Yankees need depth. They need Severino back heavily, right? When we talked about the report from Buster only about the Yankees potentially trading Severino, I shot that down immediately because The Yankees need more starting pitching. They are not in a position to keep trading it. Unfortunately, guys like Randy Vasquez, who are prospects in the system in the higher levels of the minors, excuse me, the highest level of the minors that you expected could maybe give them some depth. He's been bad as a starter in AAA, so there are questions about moving him to the bullpen. Deivi Garcia, already a failed starter. You're not going to turn the script back and make him a starter when he's already struggling to throw strikes as a reliever. And then guys like Matt Crook, who are relief options as well, that are former starters, right? They're excelling in their new roles. Why would you ruin their development and worsen their production to get a below average start at the major league level? So, they're in a tough spot. It's not like the offense where like there's an Andre Chaparro on the pitching side of the ball or an Elijah Dunham on the pitching side of the ball, or even like veterans that they have in the system. They don't have much in the way of help outside of Luis Severino coming back, which should push Brito out of the rotation and give them a competitive guy to pitch every fifth day and help the bullpen. But you still have Schmidt in there, and Cortez has to get better. So with that being said, it just doesn't look really good for this Yankee rotation right now.
It certainly doesn't look very good. And I'll tell you this, Clarke Schmidt, we all can kind of come to the agreement that he belongs in the bullpen once the fourth and fifth inning comes around. And Ryan, we've been saying this, at least I've been saying this for quite some time. The second he gets to the fourth or fifth inning, he completely falls apart. Maybe it's the third time he gets to the rotation, or the batting order rather, they start to realize what he's doing. They start to see what pitches are really effective and what's not, and they just catch up to him. But he can be a really effective bullpen arm. That's been the consensus for such a long time. So we hope that the Yankees see that, move him to the proper spot, and he can actually regain his confidence a little bit. You know what I mean? Because he doesn't look like he's very confident out there. Leaves the bases loaded, as you mentioned. Alberto Reyes comes in, 4 straight changeups, and boom, the game's out of reach. And despite our best efforts, we couldn't make that comeback. Despite Anthony Volpe hitting a home run, and Aaron Judge just barely missing that one at the end there. Like that was a winnable game. The Yankees need to win games like that. You can't give up 8 runs, and you can't lose games, when you're scoring 7 runs at the end of the day. So I have to say, I think that right now the Yankees need to, improve their pitching. And Aaron Boone said it after the game, we need to get more out of our starters. So looking at Clarke Schmidt, his pitch repertoire is solid. Bullpen, definitely a suitable spot for him. Johnny Brito, what's your take on him? Because right now, if the Yankees get Luis Severino back, Johnny Brito's struggling. Obviously, Clarke Schmidt is struggling. Who's the guy that you're sending down? Who's the guy that you're sending to AAA, or who's the guy that you're sending to the bullpen?
Yeah, so what I would do is I would just demote Brito for 2 reasons. One, I think Brito isn't an issue if he can't be a starter, he's a reliever. I think he just doesn't have a good breaking ball, and that's why he's been so ineffective, right? He's walking more guys because in AAA they chase a lot more than they do at the major league level. Throwing a sinker down and in isn't going to get a swing and a miss the way it will in AAA, the way it will, throwing a sinker down and in will not get a swing and a miss at the major league level the way it may at the AAA level, because obviously hitters are better, they're more disciplined, your quality of opponent is better, and he doesn't have that quality breaking ball. You can't throw that mediocre curveball and expect to get swings and misses against righties, especially considering that, well, curveballs aren't necessarily swing and miss pitches against righties. Those pitches typically prioritize vertical drop more, which works more versus lefties. He needs a sweeper. I'm not even saying a slider. He needs a big breaking ball with lots of horizontal movement down and away that he can use versus righties, because I feel like that's really where the issue is for Johnny Brito right now. He's walking a lot of guys. Again, that's something that you don't want to see from a guy who's supposed to be a command first pitcher. And if you look at his splits against lefties and righties, lefties hit 241 with a 370 slug against him. Righties 292 with a 631 slug against him, which is odd for a right-handed pitcher, but that's a product of having a really good changeup, but not having a really good breaking ball. So I think he could benefit from getting sent down and doing that. And I think the Yankees could maybe use Schmidt as more of an opener if they have Severino in around and he can pitch deeper into games, and you potentially call up a guy like a Matt Crook or Colton Brewer type, someone who can eat multiple innings, and you can go from there, right? Ask Schmidt to get you 3 innings and then piece it through the bullpen. That'll give you a competitive opportunity to win games. The Rays have done this with their injured guys, and I know the Yankees don't necessarily have the greatest bullpen depth in the world because of their injuries, but replace an Alberto Bray with a Matt Crook, or replace a Ryan Weber type with a Colton Brewer. Those are guys who I think can get outs at the major league level, and they've also shown an ability to pitch multiple innings. And if you can string it together, you go Schmidt to Crook for the first 5 innings, and then hand it to the Ian Hamiltons and Michael Kings of the world, who can also eat up multiple innings. You can get an effective 5th starter type if you are able to do something like that. But as you mentioned, they're not in a position where Schmidt should be starting and going into the 3rd time through the order. I don't think that's effective for either party. And Brito needs development. He needs to be able to go to AAA where he can just mess around a little bit. I'm not saying be unserious, but mess around in the sense of, hey, I can work on this breaking ball, I can work on this, I can work on that, and not have the pressure of I've got to perform at the major league level, because winning matters at AAA, and players will tell you that. They want to win, but the organization will tell you that they'll prioritize their development over them winning or losing a game. So I think that's kind of the best situation for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that the development of those guys, it's bright. Like I see positive roles for both in the future, whether it's a bullpen or a starting role. But let's talk about one other guy that's kind of struggled recently. I want to get your take on this. Nestor Cortes, right? Nestor Cortes is supposed to be our secondary ace. He's supposed to be that guy that follows up Garrett Cole, especially when you have Rodon and you have Luis Severino out of the rotation. And he has really struggled this season and doesn't look like the same Nestor. It looks like he's getting frustrated. You saw he kind of had freaked out after he gave up a couple runs the other day. The body language certainly suggests that he's kind of mentally struggling. And we know how good he can be. His stuff didn't just disappear. I do think that his location has been a little bit poor. His velocity seems to be right in line with what it was last year. His strikeouts seem to be in line. His numbers look very similar. He's just not getting the same effectiveness on it. So, 28 years old. He's walking. The only thing I will say is walking a little bit, almost 3 batters per 9, which is a little bit higher than his usual, and he's giving up a couple more home runs than you would like. He's given up 15 runs and walked 8 batters and 4 homers in his last 3 appearances. So that's certainly not ideal. I know he had strep throat the other day, so maybe that's still impacting him, and maybe he's not feeling altogether that great. But I do actually think that Severino returning will give Nestor a little bit more confidence, because they're expecting a lot from him. The pressure's really on right now for him to step up, and maybe he's just struggling with that. Maybe he's like, I got to step up, and he's just in his own head. He's not just letting his talent take over. What are you seeing from Nestor Cortes that's making you think like, okay, maybe he's not right. Maybe there's something going on here. Is there anything you've noticed that maybe is separating his good performances from his bad ones?
Yeah, his cutter's getting hit hard again, right? His cutter was a pitch that he was able to rely upon last year as a soft contact pitch and to go out and get swings and misses. That has not been the case this year. If you look at the xWOB on the fastball, he's underperforming his results. He should be performing a lot better on his fastball. I'm not concerned there, but the cutter hasn't been as effective. I wonder if it's a sequencing issue, or as you mentioned, a location issue. We've seen Cortes struggle like this in the past. If people don't remember, that stretch in mid-June and early July where he had a 5.34 ERA and a 6.04 FIP, a 2.83 home run per 9 over a 6-start sample size. I'm not too concerned about Nestor. I'm not to the point where I feel like Nestor is, a liability for this rotation long term. But he does have to figure it out, right? Whether it's a command thing, whether it's a feel thing, whether he just doesn't feel comfortable. Those are things he's going to have to start working on quickly, because quite frankly, this isn't something that's going to be able to help the Yankees win at all, right? And that's a huge blow if Cortes goes from a really good starter to a below average one. I don't expect that Cortes gives you the same effectiveness he did last year. Last year, he was unbelievable. But if he can be, a mid-3 ERA starter, that's kind of what I expect from Cortes, and that's kind of what I think you can expect from him going forward. I'm not too concerned yet. I'm going to press the panic button if we are in start 10, a third through, his sample size, and he is, not getting any better. I thought that Rays start was an opportunity for him to get better, but the 5th inning, he just fell apart, right? But as you mentioned, the walks are bad, right? He's got to start throwing strikes. Maybe, as you mentioned, the strep throat thing affected him, but, the way I look at it is, and you'll hear a lot of former athletes say this as well. If you're out on the field, if you're out on the mound, if you're out, on the court, whatever it may be, fans are only going to look at the back of your jersey, the back of your number, say, that's Nestor Cortes, he's pitching today. They're not going to say, oh, he had strep throat, it's fine if he doesn't pitch well. Not saying this to say that strep throat doesn't affect athletes, or that, different things can affect athletes on a different day. But if he feels like he's struggling to the point where, or he's dealing with something to the point where it's impacting him on the field, it may be best for him to try to skip a start or something. I don't really know. But he is out there performing, and he's performing terribly. So things got to change quick. They have to, because we're 8 starts in. We're going to start pressing that panic button if in 2 starts we look and it's, not pitching that well against. He's going to have, I think, his next start against the Blue Jays, right? Or maybe it's the Rays, I forget, or the Reds, excuse me. If he faces the Reds or the Blue Jays, and that start goes poorly, then we're going to start pressing alarm buttons, right? So we'll have to wait and see, but I think the stuff is still there, as you mentioned. It's just a matter of field command, just executing certain pitches. I have confidence in Cortes, but if things continue to go south, then we'll obviously start getting a little more worried.
Right. And that's the thing with Cortes. I think his success was oftentimes confidence based. You know what I mean? Like, you see, he doesn't have the best velocity. He doesn't have the best stuff, but he just, like bleeds and oozes confidence. And I think when you have that level of confidence, the arm slots, the feel of the pitches, like you mentioned, the feel I think is exactly the right way to put it. When he's feeling that, you know he's on. You see those pitches move. You see how confused batters are. They don't know what's coming out of his hand, and that like inconsistency of it is almost like what makes him so great. But right now, he's going through a hard stretch. Hopefully, he can bounce back, and obviously, that's definitely an ideal thing for him. And we need him to step up because he's a very big part of our starting rotation, especially with a lot of injuries and inconsistencies right now. But I'll ask you this, kind of wrap up this starting pitching segment right now. With Luis Severino coming back, what do you expect from him? Because Severino looked bad in spring training, mainly because his slider did not really. He wasn't like he hadn't perfected it yet. It looked like he was still struggling. He was still like kind of ironing out the deficiencies, kind of working through his pitching program. Looked decent in his first rehab assignment with Scranton. What do you think his role is, like stepping in day one here? Do you think he ends up becoming, a very big piece of this starting rotation again? Do you think we can't depend on him? What is your hope, or rather objective expectations for Severino upon his return?
Yeah, I think early on it's not going to look great. That's just me being, naturally assuming that a pitcher will come back and struggle with their command when they are returning from injury. That's typically the first thing that pitchers struggle with. It's not velocity usually. It's typically command. The stuff in AAA looks good, right? He was generating over 17 inches of induced vertical break on his four-seam fastball. He was getting swings and misses on the pitch. He threw a couple really good sliders. He has the cutter still going for him. I'm curious to see kind of how things progress for Severino at the major league level in terms of his command again. But I think the stuff is there. I think he's an elite level pitcher when he's healthy. And it's just a matter of keeping him healthy and him executing pitches, right? I think it's going to be rough early on. I think there's going to be struggles. But I think over time it'll get better. Realistically, can you look at him as a quick fix? Not necessarily, but is he better than Johnny Brito? Yeah, that's really it, right? I feel like you can look at some games where hey, if Johnny Brito just pitched a little better, or hey, if Clark Schmidt just pitched a little better, or hey, if the Yankees just didn't have a gassed bullpen, they would have won this game. And there's too many of those so far early this season. So if Luis Severino can come back and just pitch innings, right, even if it's a 6-inning outing where he goes 3 runs, right, that's better than whatever you were going to get from Johnny Brito. So you'll take it, right, and it'll help you save your bullpen a little bit. So I'm just expecting him to be a major league starter, right? I'm just expecting him to be capable and then progressively get better as his starts go on. And if we get that, then I think he'll be golden. But the Yankees desperately need him.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a fact. And here's another kind of thing that crossed my mind this morning. I was thinking about how Jake Bauers, and give ourselves a little pat in the back. We killed it with Jake Bauers. The people in the comments talking shit, saying we didn't know we were talking about Jake Bauers. Please leave your positive comment. You're more than welcome to drop your comment in the YouTube now that you're wrong, right? Jake Bauers has stolen the left field job. He's looking great. He's getting on base. He's curating hits. He was the only guy to actually get on base against Rasmussen the other night. And he's been a pretty nice piece to this outfield. And I have to say, he's a AAA guy coming out. Obviously, hasn't had the most lucrative MLB career up to this point, but he's making an impact, and you would love to see that, changing his approach. And I think that, the people that were calling it too early certainly are quietly hiding behind the comment now. But I'll tell you this. If Jake Bauers kind of locks down left field, looks a little bit more consistent, maintains this pace, do you think that Cashman is going to be looking to acquire a starting pitcher at the deadline again? Or do you think that maybe he's still looking to upgrade left field? Because I don't think you can upgrade both positions. I think the pitching is probably where you're looking to upgrade.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, right? What in this world where Jake Bauers figures out a way to be an everyday left fielder, what do the Yankees do, right? Do you feel like the Yankee offense is complete? Maybe. If Stan gets back, you feel pretty good about things, right? You have LeMahieu, Volpe, Rizzo, Glaber, Bauers, Bader, Judge, Stanton, and then your catchers, right? That's good enough. That'll get the job done. And as you mentioned, starting pitching's kind of been bad lately. Now, are we overreacting to a recent stretch? Maybe, but I don't think it's overreacting actually. It's the starting pitching's been pretty bad. And at the very least, they're going to need just pitching help. They're going to need some sort of depth in the bullpen. It also depends on how good Herman pitches, right? Because if Herman pitches at this rate, right, and you have, Rodon comes back before the deadline and Severino is back before the deadline, which you expect, and he's still here. Montas is supposed to be starting his throwing program soon. You got to wonder what this team's going to look like on July 15th versus May 15th. And you got to wonder, what is it going to go from there, right? Does Bader get hurt again, right? Does LeMahieu suffer an injury? Does something happen with Rizzo's back, right? Does Glaber slump, right? Does that cause some issues that the Yankees go out and get an infielder, and who's available, right? Like that's another thing too. A lot of teams in baseball this year, I don't know if they're going to sell or buy at the deadline. You imagine the entire AL East is going to buy at the deadline. The Boston Red Sox, they're in last place, but they're half a game back from us. They're probably going to be buying this deadline. You feel like the Twins are buyers, the Cleveland Guardians are maybe buyers. Are the White Sox going to sell? I mean, there are so many question marks about who's selling and who's buying that, it's hard to really pinpoint one exact team or player. Like last year, it felt pretty early on like, hey, Benintendi is going to be available, and the Yankees should at least look at him. Or even Frankie Montas. Everyone knew Frankie Montas was going to be available. Everyone knew Luis Castillo was going to be available. So, it's an interesting situation where I don't know who's that top guy for the Yankees. So I really wonder, one, what this team's going to look like in 2 months, and two, like who's going to be the guy that the Yankees are targeting all deadline. You don't want to just trade for a guy because you could end up, you don't want to end up with another, situation where all your reinforcements are hurt again. So, definitely an interesting point you brought up though. I wonder if they focus more on starting pitching or just relief help instead of the offense. And I wonder what direction they'll take with the offense this deadline.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, Cashman certainly has a couple things he needs to do, but you have to prioritize them. You can't always make moves. You can't force things, right? You can't overpay all the time. We can't deplete our farm system, especially if we're trying. Like, one player isn't going to win you a World Series. You know what I mean? Like, if the Yankees are struggling and things aren't looking great, bringing in one guy isn't going to change how everybody else performs. And I think that's what we've been hoping in recent years. Like Montas was going to change everybody's performance. Suddenly everyone's going to hit better because Montas is on the mound. That's not the case. That's not realistic. That's just objectively false. So we need our players now to step up, and we need them to stay healthy. Stanton eventually coming back, Donaldson, all those guys. It is very, very, very important that we get, actual production from the guys that we're paying $20, $30 plus million to, right? $20, $30 plus million. We need them to produce. That's the most important thing right now. So guys, always happy to hear your perspectives below in the YouTube comments. Always happy to have good conversations down there. As always, make sure to like and subscribe. Drop a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify if you are so kind. Let's go Yankees. Let's win this series. Need it. AL East, it's been tough, but I definitely think that we have a good shot, and as long as our offense is hitting, we're in good shape. But guys, as I mentioned, like and subscribe. We'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.